Hello, hello. Welcome to the undoing of ego. Yours, mine, the ego. It doesn't exist. So let's just set it aside. It's not a thing. All right. The end. Yes. Should we elaborate? All right. So welcome to all of you who are joining me. This is, if you're tuning in from Enlightened World Network, it's A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love. And this is a series of recordings now, video recordings that I'm putting on YouTube, both from Enlightened World Network and from my own YouTube channel. This began as a live stream in January of 2021, and we've been going systematically through the workbook for students. And when we finish that, it's not the end. We'll go through other parts of the course, but I want to welcome you. If you're just catching this for the first time, it's entirely possible to tune in to a video for lesson 329 out of 365 and get a feel for the presentation, right? Get a feel for the material, and importantly, get a feel for whether or not this is something that you're going to practice. And I hope that it is in whatever form. But if you are counting among yourself, you count yourself among the sincere people, if you're interested sincerely in A Course in Miracles, I invite you to go all the way back to the beginning. What you get from the workbook for students is not the same if you start at lesson 329, because, well, mathematically, there have been 328 other ideas before this one that help to lay a foundation for this one. And it's completely putting the cart before the horse. Not that you won't get something of value from that, but if you're sincerely interested in A Course in Miracles, I invite you to go all the way back to the very beginnings of this video series, where it was a live stream on Enlightened World Network. And I'm much happier pre-recording this content because, frankly, I'm not distracted by pulling my cell phone out and looking to see who is or is not on the live thread and answering questions, comments, that sort of thing. I mean, there's some distinct advantages to being live and also some qualitative advantages to pre-recording. You get more flow from me, which is what I want to give. I aim to just serve as a conduit. That's it, right? So when you look at me on YouTube, when you see this 50-year-old dude's face talking to you, it's not the 50-year-old dude that's doing the talking, which is very important. It's very important for me to realize that. And it's very important for all of us watching to realize this as well. So whether we're consciously aware of this or not, when we hear a message, there are different layers at which we're hearing it. Now, there are no layers in truth. Yes, right. A Course in Miracles does present non-duality. So in truth, there is no distinction of any kind whatsoever. However, here in the world, we're hearing things on a couple of different levels. There's the level of the intellect, isn't there? And what we call the 5 physical senses. I mean, of course, there's a 6th, but of course, there aren't any at all because we're not a body. Yeah, if you're new to this course, get ready for a nice wild ride on that one, because we all know it's true deep down. But we have the level of the intellect, the rational, so-called rational, in the Western Renaissance sense, the rational thinking mind, right? The empirical, scientific, method-driven mind who wishes to comprehend everything intellectually and parse through everything intellectually with its divisive, razor-sharp, so it thinks, intellect, and slice things into component parts and break them down into understandable little chunks and layers and different subdivisions and divisions, which it then judges and passes judgment upon, and labels some as good and labels some as bad and labels some as downright ugly, unacceptable, anathema. Yeah, a lot of those that it labels anathema are the things that we need the most. Oh, yeah. Right? So there's that layer of understanding of the intellect, which has value. It has value. And there's also the layer of understanding, which we can call by a lot of different names, but it's deeper, it's spiritual, it's soul level, it's heart level, the level of the mind, right? The real mind, not the intellectual thinking mind, but in Buddhism, it's often referred to as heart mind. Yeah. Who we really are, in other words, right? There is understanding on that level, and that level is the one that propels us into this series of activities that we call spiritual practice. It's a series of activities, isn't it? It's prayer. It can look like going to a specific building, if that's what you do. It can look like turning on a specific channel on YouTube, which you can subscribe to, by the way, if that's what you do. It's any number of different outward appearances, but it's that layer, that deeper layer, that heart-mind layer, and the level of the heart. Yeah. That's where we are compelled to pray. It's where we're compelled to seek help outside ourselves, because deep down we know that of ourselves we can do nothing. Mm-hmm. And what we call spirituality is a process of awakening to that. A Course in Miracles puts it very beautifully and in a very, very helpful manner when it says what we're doing here is we're removing the barriers to our awareness of love's presence. We're moving the obstacles out of the way. We're setting them aside so that we can see. We're setting them aside so that we can experience who we really are. And it's also very important that as we set them aside, we do not do so with violence. All of these supposed barriers are illusions. They're not real. And why are they not real? Well, they're not the will of God. We ourselves have interposed them. This does mean, if you're doing some short and quick verbal math with me, you're not the victim of the world you see. That's one of the lessons in this workbook. I am not the victim of the world I see. I am not the victim of the world I see. Repeat after me. Which can be short-term disturbing because we don't get to play the sad violin. We don't get to play in the world the victim card, because we're not plopped down here into a sea of war and political strife and suffering and disease and pandemics and all that stuff. we're not plopped here by a cruel God or a cruel set of gods that wants to play around with clay figurines and see which one of them can win a bet for causing the most suffering down here on earth. Yeah, would love really do that? God being love, of course. The answer is absolutely not. No. We're not a victim of the world we see, which means taking responsibility for having made this whole extravaganza. You are that powerful, and having made it, you can, piece by piece, as necessary, unmake it. This is what we call the spiritual path. Is it for everybody? Well, yes, of course it is, ultimately. Right now, in this moment, which we're labeling as the 2020s, whatever a decade actually is, whatever a year is, when we made all of those terms up, of course. So here we are, and we have only the present moment. We have only the present moment with which to choose love or fear, our light or our dark, God or the ego. We were not plopped here by a cruel being. If you learned that you were growing up, we weren't. And deep down, each of us knows that. So we're all in the process of awakening. Now, some of us, and you may be among these folks, some of us resist this to the bitter end, including to the end of this physical body, this lifetime. You may never adopt these ideas in this lifetime, but it is the destiny of each and every one of us to awaken. And happily, there are many doors to that, so to speak, right? There are many avenues. We call them spiritual traditions. We call them religions. And with A Course in Miracles, you're more than welcome to adopt this course as your primary spiritual practice, which some people do. I've done that. And you don't have to do that. If your current tradition, whether it's one of the world's major religions or not, whether it is a different spiritual tradition or a combination thereof, whatever that is, this material is designed to supplement. If you want to keep your current spiritual tradition, by all means, keep that, especially if it's helping you. Oh yeah, especially if it's helping you. People find all the time that ideas from A Course in Miracles help them go deeper with their own faith. And that's what they're for. So adopt whatever part of this you feel compelled to adopt. When I turn on the camera and turn on the microphone to deliver, I guess, these remarks or something, I never know what's going to come out of this mouth, appear to come out of it, right? Because it's not, it's very important. It's not me who's doing the talking, especially on that heart level, that deep down level that we all respond to, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. So with those opening remarks, let's spend just a couple of minutes on lesson 329 here. That's the idea we've arrived at here in the workbook. I have already chosen what you will. You, capital Y, God. I have already chosen what you, God, will. I've already chosen what you will. One of the central ideas of A Course in Miracles is that God's will and our will are one. to accept the idea that we're one with God, which we are, necessarily implies this. If we're one with God, God's will is our will. That can be understood at both the level of the heart and the level of the intellect as well. 1 equals 1. Even in our worst intellectual contrarian moments, we have to force ourselves, don't we, to at least accept that 1 equals 1. It doesn't equal 8 billion. It's 1. So our will is God's will. We've already chosen it. This is what we understand at the level of the heart mind. This is what we understand deep down that keeps causing us and compelling us to seek spiritual practice and experience. Even if you have not formally practiced any kind of spirituality for many years, everyone's journey here in this world looks differently. And there are people amongst us who have not really fully adopted a spiritual tradition at this moment because they've come from a tradition and left it. You know, it could be a fundamentalist religious tradition or something completely different, right? And you're in a period, perhaps you're in one right now, of seeking, legit, right? Seeking and looking for what speaks to you. And there are a lot of options out there, right? It's the heart, mind, the spirit, the soul level that's responding to a level of what I'm saying right now. The very fact that I've been talking for probably at least 15 minutes here, the very fact that you're still watching means you're engaged on that soul level, which is why I turned on the camera and the microphone in the first place, to talk directly to you. You know that I'm speaking to you right now. You also know it's not me that's doing the talking. It's you that's doing the talking at that level. We're one. And deep down, you know. I know. We know. Now, does this make the ego uncomfortable? Hell yeah. It makes it really uncomfortable, terrified. In fact, it terrifies the ego. So on the path, we may experience all kinds of what we can label existential crises. Guess what? Keep listening to this level of yourself, the soul level, the heart level. Yeah. As much as you feel capable, allow the intellectual thinking mind, that component that wants to question and judge and parse everything into component separate parts. There's no separation. So I invite you to listen to who you really are. That's who's talking to you right now. It's really not me. It's you speaking to yourself and urging yourself to accept healing, to practice these ideas in whatever form you want to. It doesn't matter if you adopt A Course in Miracles as your main practice or not. That is not required. Happily, this material does not constitute a religion. It does not constitute a cult or anything like that. I mean, honestly, that's the last thing that this world needs, isn't it? Is another subdivision, apparently cut off from other subdivisions. So is the message of A Course in Miracles for everyone? Well, yes, as I said earlier, it is for everyone. Now, on the layer of the world, the intellectual, rational mind, of course, it's not for everyone. There are many doors. You may choose to adopt this material wholeheartedly, or you may choose to wholeheartedly reject it and seek something else. So the message here that is really important is to think about, and listen to your very core being, the soul level, the heart level. Listen to who you really are. That's who keeps calling you back to yourself. Capital S here. Capital S. We're really calling ourselves back. So the question in the present moment for all of us becomes, do we answer that call? And I invite you to do just that. Thank you, as always, for joining me, but more importantly, thank you for your own practice and for listening to yourself. Keep that up.